social theory, or how I learned to look at society completely differently after my sociology class. So, what is social theory? Social theory, like any theory in any scientific field, is founded on using the scientific method to make observations and collect and track data to discover and observe social phenomena. So, in essence, it looks at things that are not only observable but also repeatable. Because remember, that's part of the scientific method. In order to become a theory, it has to be something that can be repeated successfully and arrive at the same conclusions. So, a very good friend of mine, who is one of the best sociologists ever, said it is the recognition of patterns in society. So that, in a nutshell, is pretty much what social theory is. Patterns that are repeated over and over again. We use these frameworks to look at all societies and see if they're similar and where they're different. And oftentimes, I just want to make this understood that anthropology and sociology often get confused by people who've never studied either of them. So, anthropology, while it's kind of often looked at for more ancient societies, really looks at culture and concentrates on culture. And sociology studies the structures within societies, mostly modern industrial and post industrial societies. So macro theories. We're going to look at three theories in sociology. Two of them are macro, one is micro. So what's the difference? Macro looks at society as a large. So the first two we're going to look at will be macro. Functionalism, which has been founded by Emile Durkheim, and again, examining all aspects of society at large on a whole. And what he looked at is how does everything fit together, even those dysfunctions, like crime. So you have a criminal who commits a crime. Maybe he robs a home. We use investigative institutions, the police, to go ahead and charge him and go into the court system. And then we punish him, or the penal system. And that punishment is used as an example for other members of society to understand that if you violate the social contract, i.e., you rob somebody, this is what will happen to you. Durkheim wanted to figure out what was the glue that holds societies together. So societies pre-industrial were limited. Obviously, transportation was an issue with being able to maneuver around. So you were usually within a geographical area, and you often had a shared religious concept as well. So when we look at how Europe was unified under Catholicism, but then it split when England decided to create the Church of England and split from that. And then, of course, you have the Protestant movement, et cetera, et cetera. So, organic or Gemeinschaft, it's often referred to, are these pre industrial societies. And the glue that holds them together is that sense of community and shared religious values. Now, mechanical solidarity or Gesellschaft is a little trickier. And because that's your industrial and post industrial societies, and people began to move around more geographically, they began to specialize more. And so Durkheim wanted to find out what was the glue that held those together. So when you look at organic versus mechanical, I use the examples for organic as being like the Amish. So the Amish are not dependent really upon anyone else. They can survive just fine in their own smaller family unit, right? They know how to grow their own crops, how to raise their own animals for food. They know how to do their own building and to process that lumber, chop it down, and make it's very, they don't need each other, but yet they choose to be a cohesive society. And what is that? Well, this is shared religious values, as Durkheim had discovered. Now, in mechanical society or Gesellschaft societies, I use the Big Mac as a shining example. Think of how many people came together when you picked up that Big Mac through the McDonald's drive-through to actually make your Big Mac burger. So you have the people who grow all the vegetables, so the wheat, the pickles, the lettuce, the onions, and then you also have the people who raise the cattle to make the beef. And then those people pass that on to somebody else who processes these things, turns them into flour, pickles, etc., cheese, and then bake the breads. And then you have truckers to transport these processed items to your local McDonald's, where even inside your McDonald's, everyone has very specialized work that they do, right? You have the cashier takes your order, you have the people in the kitchen who grill your food, people who put the food together to make that McDonald's Big Mac. And that is a miracle, right? It's not something that if you had to do all these tasks yourself, you would not have time for anything else. You wouldn't be watching Netflix, right? So, like a human body, modern mechanical or Gesellschaft societies, the solidarity, the glue that holds them together is their dependency upon each other. So, like the human body, each organ has a specialized job and works in concert together to keep us alive. And the same thing goes for modern societies. We all have our own specialized jobs and tasks that together help create society and keep us cohesive. So, conflict theory, which is attributed to Karl Marx, again looks at society as a whole. And what Karl Marx, who is one of the most misunderstood theorists, the Communist Manifesto and his other books, Das Kapital, etc., did not end up becoming reality, even though we have modern states that have claimed that they are or have been communist, like the USSR, Venezuela, Cuba, China, Vietnam. They all became totalitarian states, which was the opposite of what Marx envisioned. He envisioned that it would be where the majority of the people not only had a say in their economic situation, but also their government, and that obviously never occurred in any of those countries that I mentioned. So, what he found is that capitalism, even though it opened up private property and the ability to have private businesses, saw that the majority of the people under capitalism fared no better than they did under feudalism. He saw only two classes, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, and the way to differentiate them is one key component. One needs to work for a living and to pay their bills, and the other one does not need to work. That it's a choice. If they work, it's a choice. And that's the bourgeoisie. So their money works for them. Now, that's not saying that all bourgeoisie don't work. Many do. But they don't have to. The proletariat, on the other hand, have to go to work in order to earn a paycheck, in order to pay their bills. And the bourgeoisie will always try to get the proletariat to work for them at the lowest possible wage so that they can make the most possible profit. And we see that playing out in a lot of the kind of sound bites that play today, the 99% proletariat, the 1% the bourgeoisie. And people often get confused on what these are. So let me break this down for you. If you work for a living and you have to in order to earn a paycheck to pay your mortgage, your health insurance, your car payments, your children's education and well-being, then you're a proletariat, even if you're a doctor or a lawyer. So the amount of income you make based upon the education level you have or the ability to join or not join a union does not necessarily put you in the bourgeoisie class. The bourgeoisie class, a good example of people who work in the bourgeoisie class who don't have to, is Ivanka Trump. She's done a lot. She worked in her father's company. She created her own companies, right? Her own brands in clothing. But she doesn't have to, and that's the key component. She could, like Paris Hilton, the example of a bourgeoisie who doesn't necessarily choose to work. She doesn't have to work. Paris Hilton is fine. She will never have to work a day in her life. Her family's money will sustain her. The proletariat cannot say that. Now, Marx believed that this conflict where the bourgeoisie are trying to get the proletariat to work at the lowest possible wages all the time and extracting the most amount of money from the economy, the bourgeoisie do, he felt that this conflict would drive social change that would result in a communist state of shared resources because the proletariat, the 99%, would eventually get sick of how this works and rise up and throw off the shackles of their economic slavery. So we have yet to see that happen. But granted, this was only written a couple of hundred years ago, and it may never happen because attempts have been made at it that always went wrong. Watch The Hunger Games again. I had never seen the last two movies, and I've never read the books. And that was a prime example, if you know The Hunger Games, at the very end where President Coin is assassinated by Katniss. because even though she was part of the revolution, and this was so Lenin when the Russian Revolution came into place, he basically became the exact thing that he replaced. And Katniss thought that President Coin would be no better than President Snow. So when her arrow went to hit one of them, she chose the greater, what she felt was the greater evil, which was President Coin. So that was remarkable to me. Okay, the only micro theory we're going to look at out of the big three, because there's only three, and we've already looked at two, is symbolic interactionism. So this looks at how individual people create meaning and understanding of their society and their community and how they work together. Individuals change society and society changes individuals and creates individuals and vice versa. So three basic concepts in symbolic interactionism is understanding the meaning of these shared concepts and symbols, creating labels through language, and then our minds interpret and provide these with practical application. So one good way that I like to show this interplay is if you think of the colors red, white, and blue. In the United States, many people will think, and I ask you what holidays it's associated with, you're automatically going to go to the American flag and the 4th of July. That's our symbol for patriotism. We say the Pledge of Allegiance from a very young age, and we're taught that this is important. Now, if you were to say red, white, and blue to somebody in China, they might not have a clue what you're talking about, and they definitely wouldn't associate it with any Chinese holiday because there would be different color schemes that they associate, different symbols, different meanings, right? Another example is expectations that we have. You pass each other in the hallway, you say, hey, how's it going? And the other person says, not bad or fine, hey, how are you? And you expect that interaction to be very brief, very short, and to the point, even if that person's had the worst bloody day of their entire life, right? So that's an expectation we have. When someone violates that expectation by stopping you and then giving you a rundown of everything that's happened in their lives since the last time you saw them, that's how we create that meaning. We expect it to be a short, brief thing. When someone violates that, it throws us off track. In social psychology classes, you're almost always asked to do an experiment that violates a social norm. That's legal. So a lot of students will choose to answer their phone all day, goodbye. And that throws the person who called them way off because the expectation when you call somebody is that they're going to either say hey or hello when they answer the phone, not goodbye. And again, these concepts are often unique to a specific culture and don't necessarily transfer to other cultures. Although when you think of holidays like red, white, and green, that often symbolizes Christmas, right? Green trees, red Santa suit, and snow, 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 let it snow. That cultures, even in areas where there's not a lot of snow, but there's a shared sense of identity as a Christian, you would still possibly understand what those colors were associated with holiday wise. So that's it. It was just a few short slides, didn't hurt much. Now, if you're looking at this just for your own personal information, I strongly urge you to go out and do further research. This was an extremely condensed and very short version of the big three theories and what social theory is. So a good book I like is The Beginner's Guide to Social Theory by Sean Best. It's inexpensive. It's on Amazon. If you're looking at this to try to back up some information from a class, I urge you strongly also to read the chapters that were assigned to you regarding social theory and sociology theory in order to gain and grasp a deeper understanding of those theories. Have a great day.